What if I told you that the most advanced warriors in the galaxy, armed with weapons that could burn through steel in seconds, were stopped dead in their tracks by what they called a primitive tool? They laughed at it. They didn't even consider it a real weapon. But when they finally faced it in battle, they realized that they had made a grave mistake. Imagine a war where everything seems to be against humanity. We're the underdogs, the species with the least technology, and our weapons are seen as outdated relics by the other alien races. They think we're weak and that our weapons are useless against their high-tech defenses. But what they don't understand is this. Sometimes, it's not about having the most advanced tool. It's about using what you have in the smartest way possible. In this story, we'll see how a single human soldier, armed with nothing but a simple kinetic rifle, shattered the arrogance of an entire alien army. They called it a Stone Age weapon, until the first shot was fired. And that's when everything changed. Now, let's set the stage. Humanity isn't the dominant force in the galaxy. Far from it. The real power belongs to the alien coalition, a group of highly advanced species united by their belief in technological superiority. They have ships that can cross light years in minutes and weapons that can vaporize anything in their path. To them, humans are nothing more than a stubborn backward species clinging to outdated technology. The coalition views humans as a minor annoyance, a pest they thought would be easy to crush. Their armies are equipped with the latest plasma rifles and energy shields, equipment designed to overwhelm and destroy in seconds. Meanwhile, humanity is stuck using kinetic weapons, the kind that just launch metal projectiles at high speeds. To the aliens, these weapons seem almost laughable. Why rely on something as basic as a rifle when you can harness the raw energy of a star? But humans are resilient. While the coalition focuses on building more powerful and complex tools, humans have been refining a different strategy: adaptability and precision. Instead of trying to match the aliens' firepower, humanity embraced simplicity, focusing on weapons that may not look impressive but can hit precisely where it matters. And this clash of philosophies is what sets the stage for an encounter that would forever change how the coalition viewed human combat. As the coalition armies advanced through human territories, one squad in particular was about to get a harsh lesson in what happens when you underestimate a determined enemy. And it all started with one human standing firm, holding a rifle that the aliens didn't even consider a threat. When the human soldier, Private Cabahan, stepped forward carrying his simple rifle, the reaction from the alien soldiers was immediate. Laughter, sneers. To them, it was like watching someone bring a slingshot to a war. They couldn't believe that a human, standing in front of the galaxy's most elite warriors, would dare present such a primitive weapon. One of the alien soldiers, a towering figure covered in thick, plated armor, leaned down and smirked. "What's that?" "A toy for children," he mocked. The others snickered, their glowing eyes flashing with amusement. To them, the human rifle was a relic, something they expected to find in a museum, not on a battlefield. Plasma rifles and energy-based weapons were the standard for the coalition. They burned through metal, cut through armor, and could destroy targets in an instant. In their eyes, this kinetic rifle was an outdated piece of junk, a useless hunk of metal compared to their sleek, futuristic arsenal. But Callahan didn't react. He didn't get defensive. Instead, he simply smiled and held the rifle up for them to see. "Maybe it's not as flashy as your weapons," he said calmly. "But it does its job." His confidence puzzled them. How could he believe that such an old-fashioned weapon could stand against the cutting-edge technology of the coalition? The alien's amusement quickly turned into curiosity. Why wasn't the human intimidated? Why wasn't he trying to prove himself or make excuses? They whispered among themselves, speculating that maybe this was some kind of human bluff, but they still found it hard to take him seriously. "All right, human," one of them said mockingly, "show us what this toy can do." They all leaned in, expecting nothing more than a weak display of sparks and smoke. But what they didn't know was that this toy was about to give them the shock of their lives. As the aliens gathered around, their eyes glowing with curiosity and skepticism, Callahan took his position. He carefully aimed his rifle at a large, reinforced metal target that had been set up for the test, a target specifically designed to withstand energy blasts. The aliens watched closely, expecting the human's weapon to do nothing more than dent the surface, maybe scratch it at best. But as Callahan squeezed the trigger, there was no dramatic light show, no energy beam crackling in the air. Instead, there was just a loud crack, a simple, almost underwhelming sound. The aliens blinked in confusion. They couldn't see any fancy energy blasts or powerful explosions, just a small metallic projectile speeding through the air. But what happened next left them speechless. The bullet hit the target, and to their shock, it didn't just dent the metal, it pierced right through it. A clean hole appeared in the thick, reinforced steel. The sound of metal being torn apart echoed in the air. For a moment, the alien soldiers just stood there frozen, staring at the hole in disbelief. This was a target built to withstand some of the most powerful weapons in the galaxy, and yet a simple human rifle had just punched through it effortlessly. The laughter died down instantly. Instead, murmurs of confusion spread through the ranks. What just happened? One of them muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. Another leaned in closer, inspecting the damage, his expression a mix of shock and uncertainty. How did that primitive thing do that? He stammered. Callahan didn't gloat. He didn't say, "I told you so." He simply chambered another round and said calmly, "That was just the beginning." He then turned to face another target, this one protected by one of their energy shields. Now the aliens were truly intrigued. They knew how powerful their shields were, capable of deflecting plasma shots and absorbing energy attacks. There was no way, they thought, that a kinetic weapon could break through. But as Callahan fired again, the bullet zipped through the air, and the aliens watched in stunned silence as it punched through the shield without even slowing down. The energy barrier flickered and sputtered as if it didn't even register the projectile. The bullet hit its mark on the metal target behind it, tearing another hole through the reinforced material. Complete silence followed. The alien soldiers were left speechless, their eyes wide with disbelief. All the smugness and arrogance they had before was gone, replaced by confusion and a growing sense of unease. They were beginning to realize that this was no bluff, this was a real threat, and they had completely underestimated it. "How is this possible?" One of the aliens finally whispered. "Our shields, they're supposed to be invincible against projectiles." But Callahan just shrugged. "Guess your shields weren't built to handle something as simple as a solid piece of metal moving at high speed," he said matter-of-factly. What had started as a joke was quickly turning into a nightmare for the alien soldiers. The primitive weapon they had laughed at was doing the impossible, breaking through their strongest defenses, and it was only the beginning. The aliens were in complete disbelief. Their energy shields were supposed to be the ultimate defense, designed to absorb plasma, laser blasts, and any kind of directed energy weapon. But a simple, solid metal projectile. It wasn't even supposed to be on their radar. To them, it seemed like trying to stop a bullet with a net designed to catch light. And yet, here they were, staring at the holes Callahan's rifle had punched clean through their most advanced defenses. But why did this work? How could something so simple be so effective against technology that was light years ahead? The answer was hidden in the very nature of their shields. The alien shields were created to disperse and neutralize energy. They were calibrated to withstand high-frequency plasma beams and absorb bursts of electromagnetic force. But kinetic energy, pure concentrated momentum, was a completely different story. When Callahan fired his rifle, he wasn't sending out energy that could be absorbed or deflected. He was launching a small, dense object at incredible speed. Instead of trying to overwhelm the shield, the bullet focused all its energy into a tiny, precise point, slipping through the energy field like a needle through fabric. The shield simply couldn't handle the sheer force of a physical impact concentrated into such a small area. The aliens began to understand, and with that understanding came panic. How could we have missed this? One of them muttered, looking nervously at his comrades. Our technology is built to counter energy, not. He trailed off, struggling to find the right words. Not this. Another soldier, who had been arrogantly dismissive just minutes ago, now looked visibly shaken. So, we're vulnerable to. He didn't even finish his sentence. The implications were clear enough. For the first time, the alien soldiers felt a surge of fear. Their confidence had been shattered. What other primitive human weapons could exploit this weakness? What if other human rifles, cannons, or even their artillery used the same principle? If kinetic energy could penetrate their shields so easily, then everything they thought they knew about combat strategy needed to be rethought. Callahan, noticing their anxiety, decided to push his point even further. You see, he began slowly. Sometimes it's not about how advanced your technology is. It's about understanding the basics. He pointed to his rifle. This weapon doesn't rely on fancy energy bursts or complex systems. It's just a metal slug, moving really, really fast. He smirked slightly. And the simpler something is, the fewer weaknesses it has. The aliens exchanged uneasy glances. They had spent centuries perfecting weapons that were complex, elegant, and sophisticated. But it seemed that in their pursuit of the most advanced technology, they had overlooked something fundamental: the power of simplicity. Their weapons, their defenses, they were all built on the assumption that the biggest threat would always be another energy-based attack. But humans had broken that rule, and now the coalition's most advanced soldiers were left scrambling, unsure of how to respond. This wasn't just about one human soldier and his rifle anymore. It was about a flaw in the very foundation of their combat philosophy, and that realization made their stomachs twist with dread. For the first time, they saw human weapons not as a joke, but as a potential nightmare, one they had no easy way to counter. Callahan's rifle had done more than just pierce metal. It had shattered their confidence and shown them that, sometimes, the simplest weapon could turn their most advanced defenses into nothing more than a paper shield. Just when the alien soldiers thought they couldn't be surprised any further, their commander, a seasoned warrior named Commander Threx, stepped forward. Threx had been watching silently, arms crossed, his expression unreadable, but now he seemed determined to put an end to what he saw as nothing more than a fluke, a trick that worked because the humans got lucky. He gestured towards the largest and most heavily armoured target in the training field, a hulking machine with layers of reinforced plating. This was a mobile command unit designed to withstand direct hits from anti-armour weapons. "Try your luck on that, human," Threx challenged, his voice low and filled with skepticism. "Let's see if your primitive weapon can do anything against real armour." The other soldiers watched closely, silently hoping this test would restore their shattered confidence. After all, it was one thing to pierce through a standard shield or a thin piece of metal, but breaking through their strongest armoured vehicle, that was supposed to be impossible. Callahan didn't hesitate. Calmly, he reached into his pack and pulled out a single special round, a thick, pointed bullet made specifically for penetrating heavy armour. The aliens noticed immediately. "What's that?" One of them whispered nervously. "Armour piercing," Callahan replied simply, without a hint of boastfulness. He loaded the round carefully, took a steady breath, and aimed. The atmosphere was tense. No one dared to speak, As Callahan's finger tightened on the trigger, the aliens braced themselves, expecting to see the bullet bounce harmlessly off the thick armor plating. But the instant he fired, there was a loud, sharp crack that echoed through the training ground. The bullet streaked forward, cutting through the air like a bolt of lightning. And then it hit. For a split second, it looked like nothing happened. The bullet struck the thick armor with a dull thud, and the aliens almost sighed in relief until they saw it. A tiny hole began to form at the point of impact, followed by a violent, screeching noise as the armor plating started to warp and split. In a flash, the bullet punched through, leaving a perfectly round hole straight through the thickest part of the command unit's hull. The entire group of alien soldiers gasped, their eyes widening in horror. Even Commander Threx's face, usually stern and composed, showed a flicker of shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. This armor was designed to withstand direct hits from plasma cannons, to repel energy weapons of every kind. Yet a single, solid bullet had just pierced through it like a hot knife through butter. Threx approached the target slowly, his gaze locked on the hole in the armor. He placed his armored hand on the edge of the opening, feeling the rough, torn metal. It was real. He turned back to Callahan, his eyes narrowing. "How?" he demanded quietly. "How is this possible?" Callahan shrugged again, his expression calm and unbothered. "It's all about physics," he replied. "The bullet isn't fighting against the armor. It's concentrating all its energy into a single point, focusing on penetrating instead of dispersing." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "No matter how strong your armor is, if it's not designed to handle kinetic impact, it will always have a weakness." The other soldiers looked back and forth, their confidence completely shattered. Commander Threx took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain composed. "So, all of our defenses," he began slowly, almost unwilling to finish the thought, "are useless against your rifles." Callahan shook his head slightly. "Not useless, just vulnerable." The silence that followed was thick with tension. The aliens had spent years, decades, maybe even centuries perfecting their technology, building defenses that seemed unbreakable. But all it took was a single human soldier, armed with a primitive weapon, to show them that they were far from invincible. Callahan had just shattered the core of their belief system, and for the first time, the coalition soldiers felt a deep, unsettling fear. They weren't fighting against an enemy who needed to outmatch them in technology. They were fighting against an enemy who understood their weaknesses better than they did themselves. And that in itself was far more terrifying. The silence stretched on as the aliens struggled to process what they had just witnessed. They had believed, no. They had known that their technology was superior. Their weapons, their armor, their strategies, all of it was built around a single principle. Advanced technology wins wars. But now, that belief had been turned on its head. It wasn't about who had the most advanced weapon. It was about who used what they had in the smartest way possible. Callahan stepped forward, breaking the tense silence. "You see," he began, his tone calm but firm, "humans have never had the luxury of superior technology. We've always been outmatched by someone somewhere. But we learned something from that." He gestured to his rifle, still resting calmly in his hands. "It's not about making the most powerful weapon. It's about making the right weapon for the right job." The aliens shifted uncomfortable. This was a way of thinking that didn't fit into their rigid view of combat. To them, a superior weapon was one that could overpower anything in its path. But Callahan was talking about adaptability, about understanding your enemy's strengths and weaknesses and exploiting them with precision. This was something the Coalition had never had to consider before. They had never faced an enemy who could adapt so quickly, who could turn something outdated into a devastating tool. Your shields, your armor, they are built to counter energy attacks, because that's what you expected to fight, Callahan continued, his voice steady and clear. But humans don't fight like that. We've had to learn how to make do with whatever we have, to turn even the simplest tools into something effective." He paused, looking each of the alien soldiers in the eyes. "And that's our real strength, adaptability. We don't just build weapons, we build strategies. We learn, we adapt, and we survive." Commander Threx's eyes narrowed as he processed this new perspective. "But why stick to such basic technology?" he demanded. "Why not try to match us in technological advancement?" Callahan shook his head slightly. "Because simplicity is a strength of its own," he replied. "The more complex a system is, the more ways it can fail. You've put all your faith in technology, but that makes you blind to its flaws. Our weapons may seem primitive, but they're reliable, straightforward, and easy to maintain. And that means we can focus on the one thing that really matters, using them with precision." The aliens were silent again, digesting Callahan's words. They had always looked down on humanity for its lack of advanced technology, seeing it as a sign of weakness. But now they realized that it was precisely this simplicity that made humans so dangerous. The coalition's strategies were built on assumptions that the enemy would try to match them in technology, that the enemy would fight on their terms. But humans refused to play by those rules. They fought with whatever they had, however they could, and they adapted to every situation. "Sometimes," Callahan said softly, his voice cutting through the quiet, "it's not about who has the biggest gun. It's about who can make the most of what they've got." He glanced back at his rifle, the primitive weapon that had just shattered the confidence of the galaxy's most advanced soldiers. "You can have the strongest armor in the world, but if your enemy knows exactly where to hit, it won't matter." Commander Threx took a deep breath, his gaze thoughtful. He had come here today to prove a point, to show that human weapons were no match for coalition technology. But instead, he had been given a harsh lesson in human adaptability. "So," he said slowly, his voice quieter now, "you're saying, it's not just about the weapon. It's about how you use it." Callahan nodded. "Exactly. A tool is only as powerful as the person wielding it. And sometimes, the simplest tool in the right hands can be more dangerous than the most advanced weapon in the galaxy." With that, the aliens realized that their greatest strength, their technological superiority, could also be their greatest weakness. Because against an enemy that could adapt and turn even the simplest tools into weapons of precision, no amount of advanced technology could guarantee victory. As the final echoes of Callahan's words faded, a new kind of silence settled over the training ground. It wasn't the tense silence of disbelief, or the awkward quiet of uncertainty. This time, it was the silence of understanding, a silence that comes when two enemies finally see each other clearly. The alien soldiers, once so sure of their superiority, now looked at the human with something they had never felt before: respect. For so long, the coalition had seen humanity as a backward, primitive race. They had looked at human weapons and laughed, thinking that brute force and complexity were the keys to victory. But Callahan's demonstration had shattered those illusions. With just one rifle and a few well-placed shots, he had shown them that humanity's strength didn't come from having the most advanced technology. It came from knowing how to use what little they had to its fullest potential. Commander Threx took a slow step forward, his gaze locked on Callahan. There was no trace of mockery in his eyes now. Instead, there was a sullen respect, a recognition of a worthy opponent. "We've misjudged you," he said quietly. The other soldiers shifted uneasily, glancing at each other as if unsure of what to say. They had come here expecting an easy victory, a chance to mock human weakness. Instead, they had been given a harsh lesson in humility. "You're not the primitives we thought you were," Threx continued, his voice thoughtful. "You're something else entirely." He paused, searching for the right words. "Your weapons may look simple, but they're backed by an understanding of war that goes deeper than we ever imagined. You've shown us that power isn't just about who has the strongest weapon, it's about who knows how to use it." He glanced back at the still smoking hole in the armored target and then nodded slowly, almost to himself. "And you know how to use it?" Callahan simply nodded in return. He didn't gloat or rub in his victory. For him, this wasn't about proving human superiority. It was about earning respect. "We don't need the most advanced weapons," he said softly. "We just need a chance. And when we get that chance, we make it count." The alien soldiers stood in stunned silence. They had come here expecting to mock and belittle a lesser race. Now they found themselves looking at a human who had just rewritten everything they thought they knew about combat. One by one, they straightened, their expressions solemn. The smirks and sneers were gone, replaced by a new understanding of the enemy they were facing. Commander Threx took a deep breath, then raised a hand to his chest in a gesture of respect, a gesture rarely given to outsiders. "I see now," he said quietly, "that there is more to humanity than we realized. You have our respect, Private Callahan, and more than that, you have our attention." With that, he turned sharply and began to walk away, the other soldiers following suit, their heads held high, but their gazes thoughtful. As they left, Callahan stood alone in the center of the training ground, watching them go. He had started the day as nothing more than a joke, a primitive human armed with a weapon the aliens considered a toy. But now he had earned something far more valuable than any victory in battle. He had earned their respect. Because in the end, it wasn't the rifle that had changed their minds. It was the man behind the trigger, and sometimes that makes all the difference. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button for more tales of unexpected human strength and adaptability. Remember, victory isn't always about having the best tools. Sometimes it's about being the one who can wield what they have best. See you in the next story.